Okay, let me begin with a slightly, and then I want to just take questions here. I'm not gonna go into a long shtick, but let me just begin with something that I just learned, which bothers me. An article was out today announcing that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence has just received another $200 million grant.
Yes, for my good friend,
sky.
my good friend who was the chief technology officer at Qualcomm, Franklin Antonio, who I was his friend before he died. He gave them $200 million.
Well, again, it was just announced. I don't know when the money was given, but it was announced today. And I've gotten over my initial reaction. I've calmed down, but let me go on the record here. All right. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is probably the greatest scientific fraud in history. It is a con. It has only been able to exist in the shadow of the truth embargo and service the truth embargo. And over the last, 65 years, they have spent hundreds of millions of dollars looking for signals in the sky, while individuals who ran SETI would go in front of camera and spit on the researchers in this field, the citizen researchers in the field, who were trying to show that the extraterrestrial presence is actually quite real and flying above our heads. And now they just got $200 million more. Meanwhile, of course, over the years, I have seen colleagues go bankrupt. I've seen them die before this issue was resolved, while the great leaders of SETI have stuffed their pockets with money and lived very well. One day, this is all going to come out. It makes me angry. And all I can say is it's an embarrassment to science, a disgrace to the United States, and an absolute disgrace to every single person that ever gave SETI a nickel. Just want to be on record on that, folks. I could get even more outraged, but I thought about that and said, could be a downside to that. So with that modest thing out of the way, that's $200 million, a little here, a little there. It adds up to real money. We have lots of radio telescopes, which one day we'll use, I don't know, to communicate with Starlink and go on TikTok or whatever. But I'll tell you, there's going to be a reckoning on that. Who wants to fire up the first question?
I'll just follow up on that one, Steve. Did it say in the article or anything, are they going to be using the current technology, the radio telescopes? Are they going to be implementing any new technology, or is it just the same old thing that we've seen for decades now?
I don't care if they use Ouija boards. The point is that the ETs are here. They've been here since the beginning, and the whole thing is a fraud. It's that simple.
So the Allen telescope array was meant to be much larger than it is. Right now it has 39 antennas. The original design was for 400, and now they have the money to build a 400.
So they can build the 400, and perhaps a 400 array of radio telescopes could certainly be useful in terms of the looking at the universe, doing a little space science.
Yep.
But it was raised on the basis of searching for extraterrestrials, when extraterrestrials are taking people out of their bedrooms in the middle of the night and have been for months. And I can tell you that every single high-level person in SETI from the get-go knew this. The U.S. government knew it since 47. And so by the time SETI was created in 58, people in the know, people that have drinks together at, fancy restaurants and talk about their careers, of course, the SETI originators knew there was an extraterrestrial presence. So whatever science they're going to do, it is built on a fundamental lie and a fraud. And I hope one day the world comes to understand this and, I don't know, asks for their money back or turns the telescopes over to the public domain so we can all have a little radio telescope time.
Just as a point of order, most of the money was spent on the SETI Institute and its search, and I'm not defending them. I'm with Steve. They're wasting the money, but it was given to them by the founders of Hewlett-Packard, the founders of Sun Microsystems, the founder of Microsoft, and now the founder of Qualcomm. So almost all of the money that's gone into this was not public dollars. This entity came into being after Proxmire shut down the federal funding of SETI.
Let me be clear. I didn't mention anything about public dollars. I don't care about that. All of those companies could have given those money to house homeless people or do some real science, but they raised it on the basis of a fraud and a con. And the fact that somebody participated in the con doesn't make it legal or make it right. It just means that they're stupid, and or it served their purpose to like serve the truth embargo. You know, we have some alien technology we've been working on, and we hope you don't claim eminent domain on it someday. And so here's a bunch of money to SETI, which is helping the truth embargo live on, because, hey, we're looking for ETs. Why are you bugging us about these things in the sky? The whole thing is corrupt. Don't care who did it, why, or whatever. And it's going to come to light one day, and some people are going to answer for it, right? I'm not naming the names because I don't want to give them the publicity, but you know who I am talking about. Okay.
So
now look, I'm chill.
I want to say one more thing before we move on, because we do need to, is Franklin Antonio offered me a princely salary to go and work for them, and I refused.
Bob, all I can say is you were a righteous guy, and there's nothing you could have done about this. And I assure you, I mean, no disrespect to you at all. But again, isn't that a shame? Think of the salaries, think of the money they could have given to the research in this field, the people that have struggled, like Roger Lear. I could go on and on and on. They could have funded this issue and ended the truth embargo, but it would not serve their corporate bottom line. And the one thing we've learned about the United States today is the corporate bottom line of capitalism, as currently practiced, transcends everything. There is nobody's life. There is nobody's issue. There is nothing threatening this country that surpasses the need to serve the shareholders of America's major defense and technological corporations. They are utterly without moral ground, with a few exceptions. And we are paying a heavy price for that. As problems get worse and worse and worse, $200 million just bought some more radio telescopes, and we cannot even clean up the city of Los Angeles of a mounting pile of litter. And I could go on and on. It just drives me crazy. But there are worse things in this world. Since 1958, and the foundation of the Great SETI, or the early version, we have had wars, many wars. Hundreds of millions of people have been killed. Children have been killed. Terrible things have happened. This is not the worst thing. It just happens to be kind of personal for me, kind of close, right? But it's bigger than it might seem, because wars, they come and they go, but the acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence will affect the entire planet. It is transcendent. It will change things forever. And so as an atrocity, it just has a longer lifespan. It's like has more bandwidth. And so in that sense, it's a little intellectual, but if you work at it, you can work up a real anger about it. And I have on occasion. And this morning I blew it out. I'm in an office by myself, and let me tell you something, I was bouncing off the walls.
I've seen you bounce a few times. well, look, tell us what you think's coming next. Come on, that's interesting.
Well, let me go to this. There's another article, a couple of articles that just came out today, and one of them in particular I want to refer to. So I'm going to zip on over here to this link, just a second. And I'm going to read from an article. Ooh, where'd it go? Hang on, I'll find it. Should be in this one. This is out 2 days ago in the Mirror. It's not the only coverage, but it has to do with the transition of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick from Arrow to another job. All right, he's moving on. And so he's given an interview about his work and so forth. And what you're hearing in this interview is the authentic Sean Kirkpatrick, pretty much freed up from the terrible situation that he was in as the head of Arrow during this last year as they're assembling the platform and the scaffolding in order to finally bring about disclosure. But unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen until they were ready. And Kirkpatrick was, running Arrow and having to deal with all of that. And it was an impossible position. So let's just a couple of quick takes here. Alien life. Here's the lead. Alien life is unlikely to have crashed in the United States, according to top Arrow chief, despite the bombshell claims of a former intelligence official. Okay. But then he goes on. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick said that it was not his organization's job to probe the subject of aliens specifically, but to attempt to make sense of objects that at first could not be understood. What he is saying right now is what I have been saying. His job was not to look for UFOs. His job was basically to just hold the fort and be the mayor of a Potemkin village while they assembled this all together in advance of disclosure. That was his job. And he did it as best he could, but it was a nearly impossible job. Then he goes on. It says the Pentagon UFO chief, who is preparing to resign from his position, said that in many cases, they are unable to find an answer. And in others, what may have appeared as a flight into the unknown was simply explained as a balloon. And then he goes further, right? And he says this, and this is what is particularly important, right? He said that if there was no evidence of aliens, that would mean other countries had found ways to invade U.S. airspace without the government knowing about it. He said, number one, the best thing that could come out of this job, his job, is to prove, which it wasn't his job, that there are aliens, right? Because if we don't prove there are aliens, then what we're finding is evidence of other people doing stuff in our backyard. Now, we already know that there's been several statements in various releases going back almost 2 years where the government has stated this is not our tech. And it can't be somebody else's tech because our tech is the best tech. And so translate this. Sean Kirkpatrick is saying, yes, these are extraterrestrials. He's saying it in the best way he can, as far as he can go. He still works for the government. He's going to have another job with the government, and it's not his job to pull an Edgar Mitchell or a Bob Bigelow or a Gary Nolan and simply go in front of a camera and say there's extraterrestrials here. That's not his job. But you have another example of what I've been talking about. The new head of Arrow, which comes in next year, will probably be the head of this entity in the post-disclosure world. In other words, the announcement will come. They'll have basically a new head of Arrow, and that person's job will be to deal with all of the post-disclosure world and what it means. And they won't be tainted by having that difficult year that Kirkpatrick had when he had to dance around the truth, turn himself into a pretzel in order to not violate the protocols that were in place as they built this infrastructure. I have nothing but sympathy for this man. I hope he does well, and I hope that history is kind to him and that we will eventually be understanding about the situation that this fine gentleman was in. Okay, so that's the other thing I wanted to mention. This is just out. There's several articles on it, and they're all in my print media archive, as always. All righty, am I back? Have I gone? Tell me I didn't go away.
You did. You're here.
You're still there.
Okay, I'm trying to find where I am on the
in the middle.
Come on. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see what the problem is. Hang on a second.
Oh, put yourself in speaker view, and you'll always be in the center.
Yeah, I just wait a minute. A little something weird here. My camera's going weird. Done. Thank you. There we go. Camera back. And now I got to go here, 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 here. What's happened? The Zoom thingy went away. Oh, there it is. Hello. Okay, that's a kind of a couple opening remarks. Some more questions, please.
Steve, do you think that the next head of Arrow will be better placed under DepSecDef rather than when it was under OUSDI? And, it felt like the puppet masters of Moultrie and Bray were almost controlling Kirkpatrick. But now the new director would report to Kathleen Hicks. It seems like they may have a bit more freedom to actually do some good work. Do you agree with that?
Not quite. I do not think that Moultrie and Bray were even remotely puppet masters. I think they were just two other people that were put in charge of the early days there, with utterly confined to what they could say or do, and having to come and give a briefing to a committee not a hearing, and knowing that there's only what could they say or do, and they pieced together a couple of things. It was a giant embarrassment, but that's all right. The ending the truth embargo was not going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be straightforward. It was going to be a very complicated dance, a kind of kabuki theater, but to good purpose. And everybody was going to be in an awkward position, except someone like Gary Nolan, who's not involved in it. He just went on Tucker Carlson, and there's extraterrestrials here. And by the way, I'm a Nobel Prize nominee. That can't happen within the government, within the processes underway. All right. In terms of the way things are set up, Arrow is answering to the highest authorities. We are in the process now of appointing, and Danny Sheehan is actually involved in this. Danny Sheehan, of course, has started his new think tank, the New Paradigm Institute. It's now gotten early funding. Needs a few million more for those of you that have some money lying around, but he has already opened his office in Washington, and he's in the process of advising the people that are putting together the 9-person panel. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that he put Richard Dolan's name in the bucket. And I don't know what's going to come of that. But he gave it a shot, and he may have put a few others in there. Of course, hey, the point is that 9-person panel is being set up under the White House, under the president, specifically to be part of the process in which ultimately the most classified information and tech, but certainly documents and information, is going to work its way from the absolute lowest and most secret parts of our government all the way up through a chain of analysis and end up in the archives, the National Archives, wherever you can go and look at them, right? And to even accentuate that matter, the law is also stating, if it's passed, that anything 25 years or older is on the fast track. So they're setting up literally a track in which information is going to start flowing out of the USAPs and other levels of classification towards the National Archives and full public disclosure and access. Gee, boy, that sounds like a pretty big deal. That's what's in the legislation. Now, the problem they face, as I've said several thousand times, is while they're putting all this together, they can't acknowledge the ET presence yet, because that's the president's job, not theirs. And so they're putting all this together. So when the president confirms the extraterrestrial presence, all of this is ready to go. And the process can begin right away. It's all set, right? So this must be a prelude to the announcement. But the announcement is not going to wait for this information to start flowing. It's simply going to start the process. They built the structure. The president will confirm the ET presence, and then all of this will be put into motion for real. And everything they put into motion looks quite good to me. And so the post-disclosure world looks extremely promising in terms of getting a lot of information soon, but in an orderly way that is not a danger to the country and not offensive politically. And I think everybody wins, except for those that are still angry about the truth embargo and want to go sue somebody, which is not me. I just want to sue SETI, but that's a separate matter.
So you're confident the Schumer amendment will pass?
I will be shocked. It's not just the Schumer amendment; it's the whole bill.
Sure, yeah.
Which happens to be called the UAP Disclosure Act. Did everybody know that? Did you know that the act in the NDAA on this is called the UAP Disclosure Act?
Yeah.
The only way it could have been better if it had been the UAP capital D small ISCLOCR Act, right? But it's all caps, and so it's not quite as cool as I would like it to be. But UAP Disclosure Act, you didn't have to call it that. They didn't have to use the word disclosure. Now, did they? But they did. And thank you so much for that. So the situation in Washington is this. Almost everything regarding this issue is going on now behind the scenes, most of it. Things pop up and the news covers everything that pops up, I assure you. I've got over 200 articles backed up that I could log into my print media archive at paradigmresearchgroup.org. 200 articles. I tell you, that's brutal. But most of it is going on behind the scenes, and that's continuing to take place. All right. Politically, things are a little awkward right now. I think they've been awkward for quite some time. You know, it's like you walk outside. My office is 2 blocks from the White House. And you walk outside, and the White House looks nice and white and calm, and the grass is green, the trees are nice, the weather's good, people are walking around. Okay. And then if you walk on down the mall towards the Capitol, and the beautiful Capitol is there, and it looks pretty good, looks intact. The trees are nice. People are playing a little football in the green. But behind all this is sheer insanity. Okay. And so that's not helping. So where things are now is this. We have a new Speaker of the House who is odd in several ways, and probably cannot keep his job very long. And so the operating theory now is that in order to keep his job, he is going to shut the government down in January. Very possible. In other words, shut the government down, establish creds, service a certain wing of the party, and then a whole bunch of stuff happens, and eventually it opens it up. A lot of damage is done, screaming, yelling, and what have you. But again, keep his job. If he doesn't shut it down, they're pretty sure they'll throw him out. So that is where the Speaker of the House is focused, not on the NDAA bill. Okay. Secondly, and it's easy to forget this, but the 3 pieces of legislation regarding UAPs, the only pieces of legislation in the history of the United States of America, going back to the 1700s, that has ever dealt with this issue, were all embedded in the National Defense Authorization Act. They weren't separate bills. They could have been separate bills. They could have been parked in some other bill. I don't know, the agricultural, asparagus restoration program, whatever the hell. They could have been doing that. They didn't. They put it in the most important national security bill there is, already 3 times. Now it's a 4th time. And so the Senate has already established the language. It's sitting up there and has been up on the site for some time. It has extraordinary matters in it, not the least of which is eminent domain. Okay. And so if the House really wants to push back against that bill, they're basically going after a national defense, national security matter at a time when they're planning to shut the government down. And so I just don't see how they're going to invest any energy in stripping a little language, particularly in this case, out of that bill. Now, there's been only 2 significant redactions in the legislation going all the way back to Rubio's language of 2020. One was a win, one was a loss. The win was in the early act regard, I think it was the first or second act, with respect to witnesses coming forward and so forth, and properly bringing their information out. The act required that they first needed to be interviewed by the FBI, which was interesting, right? I mean, you're telling some government employee or a member of the military, yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say, but first we need an FBI interview, just to clarify things. You know who jumped on that? My good friend and colleague, Danny Sheehan. Okay. Justice warrior. He's one of the great justice warriors of our time. And he got that stripped out. Good. That's a win for us. The next year, there was another extraordinary language, and this had to do with witnesses again. And this language made it clear, it went beyond just kind of protecting witnesses, but it made it clear that any interference, harassment, or what have you of any witnesses properly trying to bring information forward was against the legislation. It was essentially illegal. And then they added a second paragraph that if someone should be the subject of such intimidation, that person, Air Force, DOD, DIA, CIA, could sue their boss or whoever was behind the intimidation and sue the United States government, which when I read, I just about fell over. I said, are you serious? You can't be serious, right? Now, that language was taken out, and that was a loss, but hardly shocking. So we're 1 for 1. The only thing that might change in this bill is somebody might say this eminent domain thing is a little bit, that's a little bit over the line maybe, but here's the problem they face. Eminent domain, as in this bill, is talking about the fact that the United States government owns that tech. That's our tech. And anything you did with that tech, that's our tech. All right. It's not owned by any private individual, and it's not owned by any private company. And let me go further here. Eminent domain does not refer to the government. You don't have to exercise eminent domain that's already in the government's hands, like some Air Force program or something, or Navy. Eminent domain only applies to the private sector, which means it applies to private individuals and companies like RAND and SIA and Lockheed Martin and all of the defense contractors. That's who it applies to. It's a direct message to them that over these years, you've been doing some fine work for us, studying those craft, re-engineering those craft, tweaking the controls, whatever we needed. But don't get the idea that if disclosure happens tomorrow, you can then immediately patent that stuff, trademark it, and start going for the big bucks. No. And Schumer knew exactly what he was doing because we are close to disclosure. And so if the president were to disclose on a Friday, by Monday, a number of companies out there would be patenting the hell out of ET technology in order to secure the, how would you say, the best interest of their shareholders. And it would be tricky. I mean, boom. And now they're going to deal with it. He just cut them off at the pass by putting that into legislation, or even just putting it out there as something that's on the Senate Intel Committee's and the Senate's agenda. That, oh, no, you're not patenting anything. So he cut him off at the pass. So, I mean, you're seeing the maneuvering that's going on here. So now if you're going to deal with that in the bill, basically what the opponents of that language are saying is that, and by and large, these are going to be people that are pretty much of a conservative national security orientation. All right. They're going to be saying, well, the United States of America, you don't want to be greedy. It is national security, but do we want to claim rights to it? Shouldn't we share with the rest of the world? That's not going to go well with the national security wing of the Republican or the conservatives in this country. And so that's just not going to work too good. And so that looks like a mistake. All right. And I don't think that they're going to go there. And so I think that's the only language in that bill that's particularly potentially problematic, only because it does gore some oxes, but they're mostly civilian corporation oxes. And so I think the bill goes through completely intact. And thus the infrastructure needed for disclosure to take place at that point will be fully in place.
What do you think of Mike Turner and his ability to obstruct?
Help me there. Tell me about Mike Turner.
He is the chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence.
Turner. Mike Turner. I'm sorry, I think he said Kerner. I don't think he's obstructing, and I'll tell you why. I mean, this comes under, again, the problem that what they're doing has got to be done. It can't be absolutely straightforward. You just can't come and say, oh, here's my thinking today. This is exactly. No, they're having to play according to a pretty much a sort of understood script. I mean, it's not like they've been rehearsing it in a room somewhere, but they sort of understand the script that everybody sort of needs to stick to. And so when Turner came out with his statement, there will be no more hearings in the House, it would be easy to interpret that as obstruction, meaning, hey, no, I don't believe what happened. What happened was that everything was moving along quite nicely. with legislation being pretty much dominated and put forward by the most powerful committee in Congress, the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is also the most bipartisan committee, co-chaired by Mark Warner and Marco Rubio, the two Marks. All right, all good. Witnesses are being interviewed. Everything is fine. But they did not properly deal with Major David Grush. They did not fully respond to him. I mean, they helped him. There was a resolution of some sort in the Inspector General's office of the Intelligence Committee, and they probably got him a little relief from harassment. But the fact is that, look, I don't care who you are, there is no restraining order that can protect you from harassment and threats. Right? None. There's nothing. There's so many ways to threaten people today, including just sliding a "I'm going to kill you" note underneath their door, or anonymous stuff on the internet. There's a million ways to threaten people, and there's nothing you can do about it. Particularly if it's orchestrated. If it's a single individual, you can find that person and stop them, but they can't. And so he kept getting threats, and they did not address it properly. And so Grush made a very extraordinary, bold, and historic move. He decided, I'm going to come forward as a true whistleblower on this issue. Really the first whistleblower to come forward. Let me, modify that. A number of people that have been working with Greer going back to 2001, he has referred to as whistleblowers. And it's possible that one or more of them may have also said that, but they have not really gotten out in the arena much. I mean, they've been in the background. So I do not, there may be legitimate whistleblowers there, but nothing like Grush. Grush did he did the full deal, right? And so he arranges an article, he arranges the interview with News Nation, he comes forward, and boom. The idea was, okay, there's no need to harass me anymore. I just spilled the beans, folks. I just told my truth. I just told what I knew to the world. Hey, just leave me alone. And of course, he dropped the bomb. He dropped the bomb in the punch bowl of the wedding, the bar mitzvah, and the fraternity party. And he dropped bodies and alien craft into the mix with the credentials to do it and the sources to back them up, except that those sources could not be named yet. And that created a major problem for everybody. All right. Everybody. The Senate, Arrow, the Department of Defense. Really big problem.
Officer approval to put it out. That was amazing.
And I think essentially, I think that another way of putting it, it's very notable. He wasn't stopped. He could have been stopped. There's a lot of things they could have done that would have not allowed David Grush to ever be given an interview to Ross Coulthard. It didn't happen. And so what that tells you is that right now, though it may not be obvious, the sentiment within the military intelligence complex and the political class is now substantially greater in favor of ending the truth embargo than the sentiment opposing it. That's a very, very simple statement. And Grush's history, I think, supports that, along with a lot of other things. And so Grush comes forward. Now, one of the things that sprung from that, aside from, Sean Kirkpatrick being put in such an impossible position as the mayor of the Potemkin village that is Arrow, that he made a human mistake of trying to mitigate his problem by going after Grush and attacking him in a letter, which I know he probably regrets now, but I understand his situation. He didn't know what was going to happen next. He thought it was going to be deluge with maybe members of Congress rushing over, demanding he come in and start testifying. Well, if that's the case and he knew it, why don't you know it, Sean, under oath? And now he's under oath in a position where he has to say, I can't talk about this in an open session. I mean, the whole thing would have been a fiasco. That didn't happen, right? Because they weren't going to do that. I mean, they knew his position was impossible. But one of the consequences of this is that Congress has got 535 members, and they all pretty much are autonomous, and they can do what they want. So they do tend to go along with protocols and party caucuses and so forth. But a number of members of Congress have gotten quite aggressive on this issue because they feel important. They feel they're just as important as Marco Rubio or Mark Warner. And one of those is Tim Burchett of Tennessee. Actually, I think, well, he's in the district one over from where my sister lived for many, many years. And I used to go to Tennessee all the time. Beautiful state. Love it. Tim has been on fire about this issue for months before Grush showed up. And he's actually gone on television and said there's extraterrestrials here and we have technology. And so when Grush turns up, it shouldn't shock anybody that in a very short amount of time, from June the 5th to July the 26th, a hearing comes together in the House, not the Senate, but the House, and not the Senate Intelligence Committee, not the House Intelligence Committee, the House Oversight Committee, which does have a national security-based subcommittee. And so, hey, Arena, let's have a hearing. Now, just because you're a subcommittee and want to have a hearing doesn't mean you can have a hearing. I mean, you can call it, but getting somebody to show up is another matter, because everyone can just say, no, sorry, not available. In which case, the only way you can have that hearing is to subpoena him or them, but they're not going to do that. And so it was iffy. Could they pull it off? Well, yeah, of course they could, because of Grush. They knew that Grush wanted to testify. I'm sure he'd even put the word out. He didn't want to wait for the Senate to finally do its thing. He was prepared to testify in front of the Agricultural Committee, for crying out loud. And so when they said, you want to testify? He said yes. And once they had Grush, I don't think it was difficult to get Grays or Fravor. So now they had a nice hearing. 3 former members of our military who had taken oaths. And of course, Grush is the centerpiece. And they held a hearing. And what did they do? They basically doubled down. Grush was able to double down on his status as a whistleblower by going under oath before Congress and saying exactly the same thing, plus saying, I'm unable to talk about this in open session, but I'm happy to tell you in private session, which means he was able to go even further. And it got even better than that, because to give you an idea how crazy, not crazy, but how odd this is, here's one of the questions that was asked. And again, the truth embargo is weird, and it makes everything weird. I think it was Anna Paulina Luna, who has the best name in all of Congress. Let's just agree to that. And she said, Major Grush, you said that we have non-human technology and bodies, biologics. Would you happen to know where they are? I mean, do you know the locations of where they are? And what did Grush say? Possibly not supposed to say. Yeah, I know where they are, but I can't tell you in open session. Okay, I can only tell you in private session. And so the world is watching this, and he's basically saying, we got bodies, we got technology, non-human. I know where it is. I know where it's stored. I know where the bodies are. And I can tell you in private session. Now, you see how this is getting the whole damn disclosure process way out in front of its skis? All right. That hearing was not supposed to happen. It's screwing around with the primal forces, as in the movie Network. And so this was a problem for the Senate Intel Committee. And so guess what? Not long after that hearing, the Senate Intel Committee's counterpart, the chairman of the House, the chairman of the House is Turner Armed Services or Intel? He's Intel.
Intel.
Okay. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee comes forward and says, there will be no more hearings in the House. And some people interpreted that as, oh boy, the House Intel Committee is pushing back. They don't want disclosure. Nah, they're not cutting up with that crap. Though keeping in mind that one of the House members is taking every chance he can to tell us there's ETs here. What happened there was Turner had a discussion, probably directly with Warner, and possibly a few other of the top people, gang of 8, because Turner's in one of the gang of 8. And they kind of understood, for God's sakes, no more, nothing wrong with the House. We love the House, but no more hearings in the House, please. That's what was going on there, Bob. And so, no, that was not pushback. That was just setting the table with the right knives and forks.
Well, they exacerbated the problem, Steve, when they refused to give Congress an accredited skiff in which he could talk about it. They wouldn't accredit a skiff. So that says to the Congress, we are keeping secrets from you because you don't have an accredited skiff.
Well, first of all, the Congress already knows they're keeping secrets from them. But let me give you my interpretation. Okay. Remember the skiff with respect to the oversight subcommittee, right? And so the skiff, it wasn't about a skiff per se. The fact is, it was who's going to be in the skiff. It was probably going to be Burchett, possibly Gates, and some others. No? Elucidate, please.
No. I mean, they're going, that bunch of firebrands? Oh, hell no. They don't want them in there.
No, what I'm saying is, no, they no, absolutely not. They do not look. In other words, a skiff is something where you have to have an agreement with the DOD. It's not like any member of Congress can just call a skiff. Also, you can't just walk on a military base and go, I'm a member of Congress, I need to see the bodies. No, you can't do that. But I get it. Little grandstanding actually kind of advances the disclosure process.
It did.
But the point is that they did not want Grush providing that information to those individuals. Okay?
Yeah, they determined that they did not have need to know from any
not a question where
they
well, it may be more than just that. Every member of Congress who is in the proper position, the appropriate committee with the right clearance, absolutely has a need to know. And that is not every member of Congress. Nope. And though they felt that that particular group, and the group only had to include one person. I mean, it could be 4 people in there, 3 fine, 1's not. You can't have the skiff. And I'm sure they knew that there was going to get blowback off of that. And I get that. It's okay. Because as I pointed out, this disclosure thing that's being put together, this is 3-dimensional chess, folks. This is really tough. And it would be a lot less tough. It could get done quicker, but the circumstances in the world keep dragging it out. I'm simply saying that do not take too much away from the fact that they did not grant a skiff to people involved in the Senate House subcommittee. Things are still continuing to move forward. And if the Senate Intel Committee has a hearing with Grush and quite a few other Grushes, some even more profound than Grush, and requests a skiff for classified information, they'll get that skiff.
Well, especially with the names that everyone can recognize.
Sure. Again, it's not, but there is a protocol here that transcends politics. It is fundamentally trying to stay within the lines so that everybody is comfortable with the process. And the process leads to disclosure, and disclosure we must have, and therefore I'm totally supportive of them being comfortable with the process. Okay, who else hasn't asked a question?
Hey, Steve.
Matthew.
How you doing?
Okay.
I'm new to this, and you have quickly become one of my favorite people in this area. Your enthusiasm is just, I love it. I'm
an activist. If you're not enthusiastic, it goes badly real quick.
Touche. So all right, so Grush threw a wrench in the plan, right? The implication is that this whole public theater that we're all witnessing was a loose script, more or less, right?
It wasn't a loose script. It was simply a very complicated script, and it was taking too long. And somebody jumped up on stage and started providing lines from the 3rd act, and we're only in the 2nd act. Well, so loose.
It just proves that government is a monolith it's not a monolith, right? It's a lot of people with agendas and their own desires, right?
Yeah.
So what was this, originally orchestrated by Rubio and company, or at what point did this initially begin? Was this when Grush came, 2 years ago, or others, started pushing the Gang of 8?
Good question, Matthew. Look, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because we don't have time, and I do have 20 other podcasts coming down the line, so have no fear. You can go listen to me for hours. But it starts on October 11th of 2017, when a website goes up on the internet regarding a company called To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, which was CEO'd by a rock star named Tom DeLonge. And that whole thing had been coming together over a period of at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years, purely behind the scenes. And without getting into...
No, I'm familiar with To the Stars.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, you don't have to go through it. Yeah.
The moment that dropped, okay, the whole mission statement was fine, but I didn't care about that. And Tom DeLonge being a rock star didn't bother me at all. All I was interested in is the resumes of the 10 people behind Tom DeLonge. And the moment that I saw those resumes, I knew exactly what had just happened. A group within formerly employed career-wise for their careers in the military intelligence community across a broad number of entities, representing the sentiments of a very rapidly increasing population within our military intelligence complex, made the decision to go public and make a personal move on this and trigger processes which could ultimately lead to disclosure. I think they had a plan. I don't think it was perfect. I also happen to think that it was designed based around an election of Secretary Clinton, but that didn't happen. So they had to regroup, and they finally still came out in October of 17. That is the beginning of all of this. Right then. Everything prior to that is prelude. That's the beginning of what we'll call the play Disclosure, Act 1, Scene 1. And it is moved steadily forward for 6 years. It did not have to take 6 years, but this has been a pretty wild and crazy 6 years. Okay, it just is. It's never calm, but I mean, the last 6 years is like really off the charts. And so it stretched it out. The real action, though, and that was but then the next, I guess you could say, the second act of this play, it begins the moment that the first NDAA act with Rubio's language is signed in December of 2020, which is roughly 3 years later. And now we're 3 years into, well, it's a 2-act play with an epilogue. We're into the second act. We're approaching the end of the second act of a 2-act play, and which is now run for 3 years. And very shortly, that act is going to close, and the epilogue will take place, and that is a disclosure. And so that, in a nutshell, is how it began. And then the 6 years, that subsequent 6 years, historians are going to be picking apart for 100 years, and God knows how many books will be written about it. I assure you, will be a lot, and there's a lot to write about. And hopefully, they're not burning any, thing in the, the burn boxes or hiding any stuff, because this is a history that the future generations absolutely must know everything about.
Hey, Steve, I think it's a 5-act play.
Okay.
Because third act is when they propose to roll out the bodies, but they, the forces behind the scene will not let that happen so easily. But anyway, my question is, what did Grush mean when he was asked by, I forgot who in Congress, was anyone harmed? And he says, and also he also mentioned something him and his wife saw also in that testimony. And do you know what he meant by who was harmed? And was it the insiders that are harming whistleblowers, or the ET alien craft? And what did he and his wife see?
Well, we don't, we really don't know. That was, again, there was a lot of questions to ask, and he responded, but again, he didn't get into deep clarification. He was answering questions like this, and then he's given an interview since then to a good friend. I think his name is Anthony Michaels.
Jesse.
What? What's his name?
Jesse Michaels.
Jesse Michaels, yes. Because they're friends, and it's kind of a fun thing, and it's like an after, show kind of thing together. And he makes some interesting statements, but he doesn't really elaborate much on that testimony. I'm going, and I don't think, and he hasn't been pinned down on it since. He's keeping a relatively low profile. He doesn't, he did the Michaels thing, but overall he doesn't want to be doing anything right now. He needs to keep it, kind of stay in the background, let things play out. But I think what he was saying is that some people have been killed in the history of the truth embargo. He didn't say when. And I would not be shocked at all if in the earlier years of the truth embargo there might have been some casualties. I know of one story, and I think he might have been referring to that, not something recent. He also might have been referring to that people have died with respect to the UFO issue. Planes have crashed, and I think people have gotten very close to these craft, and all of that, of course, was not going to be made public, and he's probably heard about that. I think it's limited to that. I don't think it's serious, meaning that, oh my God, there's ongoing people dying on a regular basis. I think he's just referring to the overall history, Alan.
But what do you think would be worth killing somebody over in this secret? What is the big secret that they're killing people about, or had been?
Well, as you go back in time, near the beginning, right? Not now. You have to really think of this in terms of the time, not now. So if we're talking 1947, 8, 9, 50, 51, 53, round in there, when the decision has been made to embargo this issue at the absolute highest level of security, and at the same time, our government is well aware that the Soviets do have atom bomb tech, and they're going to test an atom bomb, they're going to test a hydrogen bomb, and they're working on missiles. This whole thing would have been viewed as absolute top of the line national security. And so someone that really is just, the world needs to know this, or whatever the hell, and they're trying to, get something out the door, or in general, going to maybe some media back then to try to tell them a backstory or be a whistleblower at that time, would have been almost the equivalent of somebody going forward and trying to provide media or a Soviet spy information about our latest developments in atomic bombs. And you get killed for that kind of stuff. In the context of today, no, it would, but back then, yeah. And so I would put it that way. It's not, the secret was simply there's ETs here, okay? That alone was more than enough at that time to make screwing around with that a very dangerous occupation for anybody who wanted to play whistleblower. That's my interpretation of it.
I'll just chime in quickly. I was lucky enough to have a private conversation with David Grush a couple of months ago, and he is following this process to the T. And that's the reason why he will not talk privately even about some of the questions that were just asked there. He doesn't want to jeopardize the ongoing investigation with the Inspector General or anything. And I respected that. But I will say,
Vinny, let me just ask you this. You've had a private conversation with Grush. Is it fair to say, did he say anything to you that clearly should not go beyond that conversation? Has he provided you so? Okay, so he's careful with you.
Very.
And now it's simply a matter, that conversation is still a private one. Appreciate your letting us know that. And Vinny, again, thank you for being one of the great podcasters, because podcasting is, to me, was the final nail in the coffin of the truth embargo. Once that exploded and there was 800 UFO ET podcasts, I think a lot of people in the government said, hell with it, right? Enough is enough. We can't hold up against this, right? So Vinny, congrats on your work. Another question.
Yes. Do you think there's a way to recover 50 years of lost time by getting behind a presidential contingent that would be not of either Republican or Democrat parties that are putting up losers, in my view, and get the disclosure movement behind somebody with a good reputation? One example I could think of having a military background would be Bobby Inman, who was involved, of course, with some intelligence agencies and in the technology work in Texas.
To answer your question, there are a lot of very intelligent, serious people involved in the truth embargo and this issue going back 76 years. Inman was one of them, many others. And because of the truth embargo and all the secrecy and the the nature of it, the people involved, we're gonna get a bad rep. And overall, the decline in trust in America in institutions and the suspicions that have been raised because the government has done some pretty awful things, and you're involved in secret programs, but people sort of know it, you're going to have a rough time in the public domain. And so reputations have been trashed and accusations have been made. History will sort all this out. However, the way things should go down, I expect them to go down, is this. We'll get disclosure from President Biden, not because he's, an astrophysicist or a great leader per se or whatever. It's because he is the president who's going to get the last seat when the music stops. It's that simple. All right. So, and he'll get a legacy. Okay. Luck of the draw. Right. And then you will have AARO will be the principal entity within the military intelligence community that the world will interface with on this issue. It will be run by a new person. We don't know who it is. Could be military, could be civilian, don't know, but the choice will be telling, and we'll be watching that. We know there's going to be a 9-person committee working out of the White House. I think they should immediately create a cabinet position, Secretary of Extraterrestrial Affairs, or something along those lines. But in any event, so we'll have that 9-person committee. Who they choose for that will be very telling. All right. NASA, which has managed to get a little toe in the water here by creating their little group to explore, which is just show. It's just part of the scaffolding. NASA's known about the ET presence from the day it was born, I assure you. But, and that'll be good. But if we're lucky, I say lucky, if Mark Warner and Marco Rubio, who weren't able to make it today, to this session, but hopefully a future session, come to truly understand how important they are right now in the history of America. Okay. That a great deal is literally standing right on their shoulders. If they can make the decision to call the hearing in front of the Intel Committee and bring in the witnesses we know are ready to testify, witnesses that are Grush level or higher in terms of the implications of their testimony, and set the president up to then be able to disclose without forcing the action, simply following the truth, and get it done in January, then the American people will have the very significant privilege and benefit of being able to factor the truth of an extraterrestrial presence into the decision of every single member of the House that will be elected in 2024, as well as 33 members of the Congress and quite a few of the governors, as well as, all the other elected officials, which are, some of which are important too. State senators are important. But in other words, it will be literally a factor in that election. Okay, which means that the public is going to have a much larger role in affecting the structures that will emerge post-disclosure. I assure you, every major institution in the United States, same for every other countries, is going to immediately start maneuvering for position and control or status or what have you. Okay, in other words, whatever panels or boards that are formed, the defense contractors will want a member of their group and every one of them. In fact, they'd love every member of the group to be one of them. You're going to have religion wanting to be involved and so forth. And so the shape and structure and who is doing what will emerge post-disclosure. It cannot be set up pre-disclosure, because in order to create that kind of structure, you've got to confirm the ET presence, and can't do that. So I can't say who's going to run what. I do know we're going to need a secretary of, I think extraterrestrial affairs works for me, as soon as possible. Okay. In other words, that's a civilian entity working out of the White House. Okay. We're going to immediately need subcommittees. In other words, the Senate Intelligence Committee subcommittee on extraterrestrial affairs. Same thing for the House. and there may be some other subcommittees. They might actually set up a select committee, not sub, but select committee in extraterrestrial affairs in both the House and Senate. I mean, these are the logical things, okay, that you would expect. But there's going to be a lot of jockeying for influence and control. And one of the reasons that I founded the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which is now 30 days on, and I encourage you to go to hollywooddisclosurealliance.org. It's still in development, but it's now a certified California nonprofit. We're waiting on our 501c3 status. We have 100 members. We have 20 board members. We have 80 founding members. And the whole thing is about connecting the UAP, ET, citizen science research activists, journalists, documentary community with all of the filmmakers, production, funders, and everything else that, of course, generated the content that educates the world, fictional, nonfiction, and bring them together. Now, I also have a plan, to possibly create a side door on this, and also create what could be a sort of alliance between the citizen science, UFO, ET, radar community and the political world, or even the military intelligence complex. That's a little trickier. Okay, they don't have the same motivation, but the point that I'm making is this. One of the most important things about the post-disclosure world that concerns me is to what degree are all of the citizens, without the big degrees and tons of money and all the gravitas or whatever, though some had it, also witnesses and contactees, to what degree are they going to be involved in the post-disclosure developments? Because there is a way, there's an aspect of human nature that's particularly irritating and offending, and it goes like this. And there's a history of this, goes back forever. Somebody comes forward, or a group of people come forward, and they say, "Look, this is what's going on." And if you're out of your mind, you're crazy. You're nuts. Go away. Go away. Leave us alone. You're crazy. You're a fool. And then a certain amount of years go by, and suddenly it turns out that those individuals were exactly right. They were, as the Chinese curse goes, ahead of their time. And so now, oh, it's true. And now the mainstream world says, oh, it's true. And let's get involved. We're going to deal with that, us mainstreamers. And then the people that were right earlier on come forward and say, look, we have all this information and knowledge, which you completely dismissed so many years ago. We'd like to contribute. And what the mainstream world says to them, and this is human nature, is, yeah, sure. But you thought it was true back when it was crazy to think it was true. And so as far as we're concerned, you're still crazy. Now go away and let us carry the ball. I'm going to do what I can do to make sure that the Richard Dolans, and you name all of the other people, including the ones that have passed, the Roger Lears, the Bud Hopkins, that their work, their books, their documentaries, their thinking, which was dismissed for decades by our government, by the universities, and by many of the journalists, is acknowledged as being, you were right. 90% of everything you've done is right. And for God's sakes, come on in, and we want to know, help us, because we don't know. We don't know. There's a lot of people in government that know the ETs are here, but they don't know anything after that because they haven't got time to read these books behind me here. And besides, it would be awkward. And so is this going to happen or not? Well, the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is designed to mitigate that situation, because if it starts creating deals, and the HDA will make no money, charge no attendance, no subscriptions. All we do is network people together and raise non-profit donations, so that they can get together and make their own deals, their own docs, their own movies, and make lots of money. I hope they all make lots of money. But think about it. If it leads to serious documentaries about the truth embargo that go up on those big screens with 2,000 or 3,000 theaters, that is going to give huge gravitas to these people. James Fox has got a lot of gravitas. He's made some fine documentaries. Not a single one has ever been given theatrical distribution. It's a political doc. And some people would say, well, you know, political docs can't make any money. You want to know a movie that made a lot of money? One of the highest grossing movies of all time? It was a political documentary. And it is made in modern dollars, $500 million. And it cost $7 million to make. Its name was Fahrenheit 9/11. And so the whole idea that, well, a political doc about ETs can't make money is all nonsense. And so if the film industry takes advantage of this networking entity that Dan Harari and I just created and starts making lots of high-level content, it elevates the gravitas of these people and makes it harder for the political class to dismiss them. So you see, you know, that's what I'm trying to do. And let's see how that goes. Next question. Come on. What about these people that don't have their photos up? Are they ashamed to be seen?
I believe Jonathan's up.
Who's up?
Let me lower my hand here. There we go. Stephen, can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jonathan.
All right, great.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Jonathan.
I'm right here. It's good
Yeah,
to see you again. We met a million years ago at an event in Napa. I can't remember the name of, but
I'm not that old, but I'm sure it was a while ago. Yeah,
it was the premiere of a really great documentary on the Tic Tac that I remember. It was my first exposure to the subject, and you gave a lecture afterwards, which was fantastic. So I have not seen you since, but it's good to see you again.
Okay.
So a question I have for you, I popped it in the chat. I can try and read it. I should just read it. So we're starting to see a critical majority of Americans acknowledging the reality of UAP UFOs, with polls showing broad public support in favor of less secrecy, more disclosure. But this movement still seems to suffer from a fairly severe credibility problem in that few people can talk about the subject in a public setting without smirking or couching their discussions in sarcasm. And I referenced the Chris Christie's comment in the last GOP debate. How can we change this? How can we move the dial here?
Again, perception. This is a complicated process. It's hard to follow. All I do is follow it. And so that person's assessment is simply wrong. Okay. First of all, one guy, Christie, makes a snide comment. I mean, the odd article turns up. Let's be clear. If you go to my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org, and you go to resources, print media archive, I have 15,000 articles there. 15,000 mainstream news articles about this subject. In this year, the most ever will be printed this year. It's going to approach about 1,900. And this is triaged out of twice that many. In other words, there's another 1,900 articles. They're just not high enough. They're just not in a level of journalism that's appropriate. I'm trying to stick within a certain range of relatively professional journalism. It's going to be about 1,900 articles. I think maybe 1% of those articles is ridicule. 99% is straight journalism. Secondly, the stigma on this issue is completely gone. It's virtually gone. The fact that Chris Christie hasn't figured that out yet, that's Chris Christie's problem, not our problem. All right. The stigma is so gone that after years of trying to get UAP as a replacement for UFO, because the term UFO is a trigger term, and it's been completely undermined and bastardized by the truth embargo, to give the journalists and the politicians and other people a phrase referring to the subject that wasn't a trigger term, UAP, totally safe. And we did. And UFO is only in all the legislation one time, and it's in there as a definition. They used UAP. Unidentified aerial phenomena is in the current bill 141 times. UFO is in there once as a definition term. But guess what? The stigma is so now gone. UFO is back, and it's being used freely everywhere by everybody, including politicians, and it's okay. That's how destigmatized it is. And so that assessment is simply wrong. We don't have to do that. It's done, right? Anybody that pops their head and writes some stupid ass article, and there's one recently I just saw, it's an embarrassment, and we're happy to point that out to them, and I will. But no. I mean, there is still going to be that odd article, but that's always the case.
So you don't think
the fact is the
stigma
stigma's
credibility problem anymore? Is that what you're saying?
As what now?
Are you saying that the subject matter no longer has a credibility problem? It sounds like what you're saying.
This in terms of where it matters.
In the public media, I guess. Yeah.
Major journalism, the Congress, the Department of Defense, it no longer has a credibility problem. If there is a credibility problem out there institutionally, now again, individuals can have problems, and so what? The universities, which have the worst record of all of American institutions on the subject, I mean, it's so bad, it's execrable, and they're going to have to answer for it. Believe me, they're going to have to answer for it. I'm going to make sure they don't get left out. Universities are just completely out of it, and so it's possible that if you were to bring it up on a university campus, you might get pushback. But then universities are struggling in a lot of ways right now, and are dysfunctional as hell. And so, but they're irrelevant. I mean, universities now are irrelevant on this issue. One day they'll be relevant because they'll have entire departments of extraterrestrial studies, extrobiology, and so forth and so forth. And they'll finally get in the game, but they've completely stayed out of the game, right? They just said, we want nothing to do with this. We're just in the business of learning things, and we don't want to learn about that. And it's amazing. It's a failure. It's the greatest intellectual failure in history, but they're irrelevant for now. And so in terms of institutions, all the ones, no. We don't have a credibility problem anymore. Not at all. The people that have a credibility are the ones that come forward and try to somehow explain away the evidence that's come forward, or try to hold their ground a little bit. And it doesn't go well for them. So we're okay. In other words, we're past that, right? Now it's just a matter of getting everything arranged properly and setting it up so we can have disclosure in a way that's constructive.
Thanks for that.
Sure.
Linda.
Hi, Stephen.
I see that. Okay.
Thank you for everything that you do.
You're welcome.
I live in Virginia, so one of my senators is Tim Kaine, who surprisingly has been very vocal to me about being for disclosure and everything.
Really?
Mark Warner's office used to be more open, and they seem to have maybe cooled off a little bit. What is your perspective on that?
Oh, that's interesting. First of all, I didn't know Tim Kaine. When you say open to you, in other words, in correspondence with him, you've gotten some openness. Have you?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah, but have you seen him putting out any statements or giving interviews on this? Okay, but privately. Okay. Well,
but it was a real letter. It wasn't like a form letter, which is what I get from Mark Warner's office, unless I communicate directly to his legislative director.
Well, it's nice to know that Tim is on board here. That's good. He's an important senator. As far as Mark Warner, look, the reason that he's gone quiet on you, dear, is that he is now in the thick of the final act of this play. All the eyes are on him, and so he has to step back and not be making statements really other than what would be part of the disclosure process. So it's not that he doesn't care anymore, I assure you, but he's in the thick of it. After disclosure, though, I'll bet you he'd be happy to communicate with you again. Okay. Maybe even invite you to the office. Come on down. Let's go to lunch in the cafeteria and talk about ETs. That'd be cool. I will accept.
Maybe I'll get that from Tim. Okay, thank you.
I found Mark reasonably easy to work with when I was at Virginia Tech. So Stephanie has the following question. I'd like to know if you find there are ways that activism on this topic is similar and or different than work on other topics. And she's asking as someone with a history of political activism on cannabis.
I love that question. Oh, God. The 20th century has been a time for some of the greatest activist movements in history. Part of the reason for that is that as you go back in history, being an activist got increasingly dangerous. So there'd be a movement, but it wouldn't last long. They'd kill everybody, right? But in the modern era, the 20th century, with the rise of democratic nations, we've seen extraordinary activism, major movements. and they've accomplished a lot. Almost all the rights and privileges we have in our democratic society, and pretty much true of every democratic society, we owe to activism. It's impossible to find one that doesn't have an obligation to activism. The birth of our country was an activist agenda. Right up until the revolution, and the revolution was basically activism, but leading up to it was all kinds of activism, and then afterward more activism, whatever. Okay. There has never been an activist movement like this one. The disclosure activist movement is a true activist movement and will be seen as such. And there's never been one like it. It is unique. And what do I mean by that? Probably the most extensive activism in the United States today, and even almost worldwide, the one with the broadest spectrum and most action, is the environmental activist movement. Why? Because, well, there are so many environmental issues. It's not one thing. It is a spectrum of things, all kinds, and every one has its own problem. And so you've got activists in the environmental movement going after all kinds of issues, incredibly complex. Vast sums of money are being invested. Some like it, some don't, doesn't matter. It's a massive activist movement. But guess what? No nation in the world has put out any statements to the effect that there isn't an environment. Meaning, why are you upset about the environment? There is no environment. Environment is no environment. What environment? Nothing there. Go away. I could go down the list of activist movements. Every one of them. Yeah, we know what you're upset about. This movement from the beginning was to try to get a change in policy about something that the government said didn't exist. Didn't exist. There's nothing there. And a lot of people bought that. Imagine the degree of difficulty that creates for an activist in this field, or even a researcher. I did this incredible book. It's this thick. It's all about, and the publisher goes about what? It's about, oh, there are no ETs. So why did you write the book? I mean, why did you do that? This is nuts. One of the examples I like to use, which I think makes it a little clearer, is that after we embargoed Cuba after the Cuban Missile Crisis, because we were mad at Cuba and we decided to punish the Cuban people forever, so we embargoed Cuba, and that embargo is still roughly in place, but there were plenty of people that objected to it, certainly after a time, and so they were activists to try to end the embargo on Cuba. And there was a lot going on, and they approached members of Congress, and there were some demonstrations in Florida, things like that. Imagine if, as the activist movement to end the embargo on Cuba was met by a complete societal assessment or decision by politics, by universities, and by the media. What Cuba are you talking about? There is no Cuba. There's no island down there. We don't have an embargo with Cuba because there's no Cuba. And so why are you activating about it? Now, people would say, well, that's absolutely insane. What are you talking about? I have photos of Cuba. They're fake. I have people that have been there and came back. They're lying to you. I've been there. You're lying to us, or you're insane. And on, and year after year after year, people saying, we want to go to Cuba, and the government saying there's no Cuba. That sounds really nuts. That is exactly what this movement has been dealing with from day one. Exactly that for 76 years until now. Okay. You're trying to get the government to change policy about something that doesn't exist. So why would we change policy? And so the answer to that question is, this is very different. It has been brutal, right? The environmental movement is about an environment that the government says exists. And guess what? The environmental movement has got hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Hell, just the effort to save the whales has gotten untold millions of dollars. Every time they needed a new ship, a movie star would give them one. Nothing wrong about saving whales. I love whales. But whales do exist, and the government's never denied they exist. But on this issue, there is no there. And so why should I fund you? Why should I help you? Why should I write an article about your work? Why should I care? That's what we've been dealing with. It's like, and what's amazing is that in It would have been less frustrating to do this in a dictatorship, because if you try to do something like this in a dictatorship, rather than go through 40 or 50 years of frustration, they kill you in about a week, and there's no pain. Your suffering is over right away. It's like, boom, you're dead. But in a democracy, they keep doing it decade after decade after decade. And the government keeps saying, I don't know. Okay. This is really strange. It is very strange. But the issue is big. Again, the issue is way bigger than Cuba. It's even bigger than the environment. It's bigger than any activist movement in history, and there's been some big ones. It transcends politics, religion, finance. It transcends everything. It's that big. And so, hey, you want to get into the arena with something of that magnitude, you accept whatever difficulties you're going to get, because they're going to reflect the magnitude of the issue. And so I don't have any regrets about that, and I understand it. But I like to let people know, hey, this was not easy, right? Which is why the celebration post-disclosure is going to be so much more rewarding, so much more, I don't know, just, it's just going to feel really good. And I hope we have lots of Zoom calls like this with big screens, and everybody's got a glass of champagne, and we're getting drunk, and we're sharing old stories and talking about Bud Hopkins and all the great guys and John Mack and all this stuff and all the things they did and all that stuff. And we're just partying like crazy. That can happen, you know. I mean, that's why they invented Zoom, frankly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, this is not a path I would recommend to anybody. I got in it 26 years ago, and I was lucky. But the only reason that I was able to take this path, and it's true of a lot of people in the field, but particularly in activism, is that at the time I made the decision, no relationships, no pets, no finances, no corporate allegiances, no obligations of any kind, right? I could have just walked into the ocean, it would have been the same thing. And so I was free. I was free to jump into this, and there was not a damn thing they could do to me. I had nothing to lose. Not many people are in that position. And so they have a lot to lose. And so I really have respect for those who had those ties. They had relationships, they had obligations, they had family, and they still took this on. People like John Mack, for instance, Roger Lear, and others. It was easy for me, a lot harder for some other people. And they took it on and paid the price they had to pay. And, well, we'll be thinking of them the day after disclosure.
I wanted to thank you for agreeing to be on with Lala Bright on Tuesday night. She's an experiencer and my girlfriend, and she looks forward to interviewing you. Thank you for doing it, Steve.
Sure. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Sweet.
Because right before we started, hi, Steve, so good to see you again. Right before we started, we were in a chat, and it's so funny to me that every time I feel like we get beaten down by the subject of disclosure and we start like overthink it, we can always turn to you for hope. You somehow are able to like see, like turn that Rubik's Cube a different way to show us how this can actually happen. I got to tell you that means so much, Steve. I just love you. I love the turtleneck, Steve Jobs look, love it all.
Yeah, now I got it going. I lost my glasses though. I just had COVID, and I have brain fog, and I've lost my Steve Jobs glasses. I'm very upset. They cost $200. Look, let me respond. One of the jobs, why we need activists, these are people that have the ability or willingness or whatever to climb a ladder sufficiently high to get perspective, to get what I like to call a, I've forgotten the word, again, brain fog, COVID. It was the HV1 variety, not bad, mostly throat, not lung, but hey, I can't think. The point is they want to get a vantage point, right? And they find a vantage point to be able to project, to give people a sense of what's going on and why they need to go forward and so forth. This happens in almost all activism. There is one example of it, which is legend and perfectly describes it. And it, of course, is the legendary speech by Martin Luther King. And in this particular speech, and I need to get the specifics. I need to be able to put out the date and everything just like that. And I don't have it handy, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. In this speech toward the end, He says, I have been to the mountaintop. I have seen the other side. That's exactly what I'm saying. The activist King had climbed to the top of the mountain to get the vantage point, to see what is happening in the larger, not in the granular down in the streets where all the fighting is going on and the activism is happening, but be able to get up there and say, this is where you're going. And I can also see what is happening. Try to keep the focus. Don't get too tied up in the details. Remember, you've got to get over this mountain and you're going to see the other side. That is exactly what every activist has to do, though very few can say it that well. And so, because he saw the other side, he could be optimistic. He could say some of the things he did. If he couldn't see the other side, it would be so much more difficult. So it's not just a matter of optimism for optimism's sake. It is that if you can get that vantage point, you can say with a certain authenticity that, yes, this is going to work out. Now, even if you couldn't see the other side, even if you were just guessing about it, right? I got an idea, I can't quite see it, but you're going to be optimistic. If you're going to be an activist, you have to be optimistic. The last thing you're going to do is get in front of a bunch of people and say, look, we've got serious trouble and we have got to do this and that in order to solve the problem. Now, I should add, there's a snowball's chance in hell it's going to come off. I mean, it could happen. I don't know, but the obstacles are unbelievable. And I don't know if I could stand it any longer. People are going to say, well, it's nice meeting you, but why the hell should I be paying attention to you? In other words, you have to err on the side of optimism, not pessimism. If you can't do that, for God's sakes, do not become an optimist. Become a stand-up comedian, a political stand-up comedian, of course, which is where we get all our news now, right? Political stand-up comedians are not known for their optimism, but their pessimism is what gives them their humor. And so they make you laugh while the activists climb up to the top of the mountain and say, oh, okay. They keep you laughing while you climb the mountain, and then you finally get up there and you look over and go, oh, hey, oh, great, okay. And then you move on down. Now, after we get down the other side and life is good, will we still have stand-up comedians? Yeah, we still will. We have lots of troubles and lots of problems. They're not going to go away. And I wish I'd become one, but I didn't discover my skills until I was very late in life. And so what the hell? It's a little late now to go out there and, start doing improv or whatever the hell. So I just do it as a add-on to my podcast.